Welcome to Close Up with the Hollywood Reporter. We're here today with Sterling Brown, Billy Bob Thornton, Riz Ahmed, John Lithgow, Jeffrey Wright, Ewan McGregor. And we're going to dive right into this.
Well done, Lacey. Let's do it. Let's do it.
What was the last scene or role that made you genuinely nervous?
This one.
Yeah. The role or a particular scene?
This one?
You talking about Westworld or you talking about being at this
No,
table?
I'm talking about this round table.
I was very nervous 2 nights ago. I did a solo show. I travel around with a one-man show, and I hadn't done it for 2.5 years. I did it 2 nights ago in Oklahoma City.
Really?
And that's 2 hours and a quarter by myself on stage for about 1,200 people. And I'm no stand-up. I was terrified. So,
What's the show about?
It's called Stories by Heart.
Okay.
You want to hear about it?
Yeah.
No.
Tell us a little something.
Well, it's a 2-act evening, and each of the 2 acts features a short story.
Okay.
A P.G. Wodehouse and a Ring Lardner, an English and American. Very funny, very ironic. What the 2 stories have in common is they're both contained in a big fat book of stories that my father read to me and my siblings when we were kids. Okay. And I used the same book to read to him when he was an old man.
Yeah.
Very depressed, near death. And he picked the Wodehouse story, and it made him laugh. And that little moment was the inciting incident of this whole solo show. The only thing I've ever written for myself to perform, and very personal to me. But the 2 stories are great performance pieces. I'm going to talk about this for the next hour.
What about, the rest of you? Was it, whether it was this current role or it was a past one, did you have reservations? Did you have questions? Did you worry about the sort of repercussions of these roles?
I just shot a scene that made me nervous.
Why?
I'm working right now on a film called Hold the Dark, based on a novel, working up in Alberta. And was shooting a scene with 5 wolves wearing a caribou suit. And I wasn't sure about how appetizing the suit would seem to the wolves. But as it turned out, they were a little confused that the caribou was actually speaking. So they were freaked out by it, so it was all good.
So
but I did walk into that with some reservations about whether I would survive.
An amazing coincidence. 3 nights ago,
Your caribou suit.
I was lying down, face down in the snow, right outside of Boston, in a scene where 4 wolves were sniffing around me.
Is that
Are you
right?
serious?
I can't believe the coincidence.
Well, yeah, just last week, yeah.
What about you guys?
Oh, man.
I will say Nina Jacobson was on our roundtable last year for People vs. O.J. and she talked about how hard it was to cast the role of Chris Darden, how she had so much trouble finding Black men who wanted to play that role because they so sort of detested who he was and what he stood for.
No, she told me a little bit about that. And I would say that was pretty nerve-wracking for me because it was sort of the beginning of being invited to roundtables like these. And you know, your boy lived off Pico, and they were looking all over South Africa and then London, et cetera. I was like, yo, I'm right here. But what was so interesting about the whole process was being surrounded by people who I admired, who've been doing this for a much longer time than I had at a high level, and how egoless everyone was in terms of their embracing of me, which taught me when you are confident and feel good about what you do, there's no need to make other people feel small. And I thought they were gonna have me making coffee runs or doing push-ups in the corner. Hey, rookie, do that. But everybody was just so cool from Jump Street, and they got me over my nerves very quickly, so we could just tell the story. So that was nervous, but it went through it pretty fast.
This is true. When the more secure you feel, the more kind of giving and loving you can be to other people. Which is why I'm always an asshole on set. Personally,
You're that guy.
Making faces off
No
camera.
doubt. You gonna do it like that? You really gonna do it like that? Okay.
I've had that done to me, actually, which is kind of weird, weirdly helpful because it just brings out wild card things that you would never do, but probably don't belong in the scene, though. Speaking about nervousness, I don't know about you guys, but I get nervous before every job. Yeah. I get nervous before every role I take on. I haven't been doing this for as long as most of you, but I don't know if that's something that ever you find goes away.
It gets worse and worse.
Right.
Yeah.
It's always...
Genuinely?
Yeah, genuinely. I find that before every role now. It's my wife will tell you there's a 2-week period of I'm not going to be able to do it. I'm not going to be able to do this one. And I really, truly believe it, that it manifests itself in a really real way where you can imagine yourself on set not being able to cut it. Things like not being able to remember lines even, you know. We've been remembering lines for 25 years, but the nerves, in my experience, get worse and worse.
I think that's the central driver for an actor is not to make a fool of yourself. You know? Like at the simple, you know, what's your motivation? Not to make a fucking fool of yourself.
Well, you know what?
But in a sense, we're all sort of putting our insecurities in play.
Sure.
I mean, you at a certain point you realize, well, I'm terrified. That's good.
Yeah.
Yes.
Go
That's
right
the catch-22. Like, I mean, I've done guest stars and stuff on, you know, a few different things, and my nerves don't always get up for that. But when I am nervous, it means like that's the one that I should be doing. You know what I'm saying?
That's
like,
absolutely
that's
right.
the one that's exciting.
And you look back and you realize the best things you've done, your real breakthroughs came in roles that you were scared to do.
Sure.
Yeah.
And the ones that sometimes you felt, while you were doing, you're just totally screwing up because you constantly felt like you were out of your comfort zone, or at least that's how sometimes I felt when I'm finding this up until the last day. I'm still finding it.
That's so amazing. Listen, the transition that you underwent, that your character went through on the night of, man, from like choir boy sort of dude to like tatted up, shaved head, you know, dry. It was beautiful.
Thank you.
So
it's
the
amazing
fact that
what
you
a
had
haircut
nerves.
can do.
Yes.
Amazing.
I'm
Shout
curious.
out to hair and makeup.
So Billy,
department.
you've obviously you've had this tremendous career. What do you wish you would have known at the beginning about how to handle Hollywood success? Would you have done anything differently?
Probably not. Yeah, I don't think I would have changed anything. And it was not easy. As a matter of fact, I was destitute out here for years, you know. And I now look back on those days as probably my best times out here. Really? Because everything that I do now and draw on comes from that, you know, and
Of not wanting to go back to that place?
no, I loved it in the moment.
Right.
I forgot how, after a while, you forget what it feels like to dream. And so I remember being so alive and so eager and so in a fever. I mean, a bad fever too, you know, all at the same time. But when you have everything ahead of you and you're dreaming like that, it feels so great. And maybe at the time, you know, you wish things were different or you weren't starving to death or whatever it is. But when I look back on those days now, they were some of the best times of my life.
What were you dreaming of?
Dreaming of being able to be, I never thought I'd become a movie star. I dreamed of being an actor and maybe being fifth or sixth guy down the line, playing a part like Walter Houston might have back in the old days or whoever it was. That's what I thought. I liked Warren Oates and guys like that.
Would you have done anything differently, Ewan?
No, I don't think so, because I think our path is our path, isn't it? And I wouldn't want to change any of it because it's led me to where I am now. I don't know.
Is there anything you wish someone had whispered in your ear about sort of this is what, this will either get you there faster or the path may be a little different?
No, because I wasn't really aiming anywhere, I don't think. I wanted to, I was always arrogantly self-assured that it would be fine. Like really from the start. I was, you know, people who would worry for me on my behalf, family or whatever, that it's a difficult profession and you might not make. I was always just like, no, it'll be fine.
Okay, I got this.
I was right. So that was
exactly.
Well, you kind of always think tomorrow's the day.
Yep.
Right.
I mean, if you
assume.
know how long it's going to be, if you knew that, it would be different, but you don't feel that. You feel kind of like everything's going to be okay. Tomorrow's the day, you know?
You know, Billy, you're the only one at the table that I've actually worked with. And we regard you as one of our great serious actors, but I remember being surprised and struck when you told me that you'd really started out in a sitcom with John Ritter.
Well, not really. I did that. I did that for a couple of seasons, but I started out doing theater around here and also a one-man show. And that's where the character from Sling Blade came from, was a one-man show. And my first job was on something like Divorce Court or something like that. And then I did a Matlock and a Knots Landing. It was just junk like that. But you took whatever you could get. But one of the problems I had early on in the early 80s was I would go up for parts of Southern guys because I was from the South, and they always told me I wasn't Southern enough.
What?
And I would go up for parts of bad guys, and they told me I wasn't mean enough because I was never a good auditioner, and I didn't. That's one that maybe I should have thought about. If you didn't go into the casting director, this is before you ever got to see the directors and all that, if you were going in for a bad guy, and let's say it's a Southern or Midwestern bad guy, if you didn't jump on the table and spit and scream, you didn't get the part.
Right.
And if I didn't play a Southerner like this here and talk like this and come up, boy, I tell you what, I never did, if I didn't do that, I didn't get the part. So if I came in for the Southern bad guy and I said, listen, man, one more word out of you and I'll fucking kill you. Do you understand me? And then, and they're like, next,
I would say to that point, the difference between, I went to grad school at NYU and I started my career in New York, and it felt like the theater community prized the ability to transform more than the LA community. They want to see you just come in as the guy. So when I did OJ, I just spoke like Darden the whole time. As soon as I got out of the car and asked where I was supposed to go, because I just didn't want to do anything to mess it up. Because I had times where I'm like, okay, now I'm going to take my moment and then do something. And then they're like, nah, it's not him. He's putting something on. Whereas in New York, it's like, great choice.
Yep.
Choice is appreciated. In LA, it's like, I want to see the guy.
John, to the question you had asked, Billy, you've obviously, in your career, you've fluctuated back and forth. You've won an Emmy for being a serial killer, and you've also won one for being an alien dad on a multi-camera sitcom. What do you the offers that you hear the most? And what sort of genre are you approached for?
Well, they really come from all directions.
Yeah.
I'm a lucky actor in that sense because I've worked in different veins. And I think all that comes from the first entire 1/3 of my career was in New York theater. And I have been hopping between movies and TV and stage my whole career. I'm a character man, and I've done a lot of extremely excessive acting in my day. So usually when there's a total whack job, I'm right at the top of the list.
You're there, guy.
And it's a very short list. The profession surprises me all the time. Winston Churchill could not possibly have been a bigger surprise. Just came out of the blue, and I couldn't believe they were asking me to play the role. And it was a phone call from my agent, and by the end of the sentence describing the offer, I'd said yes. It was just so surprising. We're all in the business of surprising people, but it's best if we're surprised too.
Sure.
No doubt.
What are the roles the rest of you sort of get approached for that you sort of say, oh, not this again? This can be anyone. You're looking at me like you have an answer.
I'm looking at you like maybe you know what I'm going to say.
I think you wrote a very poignant essay on precisely this topic.
Well, it's funny. I guess I came into this kind of essay you're referring to kind of speaks about representation, right?
It does.
And that's really, I think, what we all do. That's kind of the business that we're in. And I kind of feel like sometimes when you first start seeing gay characters in mainstream culture, or black characters, or Muslim characters, they can start off as the kind of stereotype, the stereotypical portrayal. It's the cab driver, the shopkeeper, the drug dealer, the shopaholic queen. And then sometimes, hopefully, you kind of move beyond that, and it's still storylines that are tied to that character's ethnicity. They're still tied to their sexuality, but they're kind of working against those stereotypes. And I was lucky in a way that I came into the game just when we were moving from that stage 1 caricature kind of thing into stage 2. So a lot of my early work kind of deals with the issues around the war on terror or Islamophobia, but I'm proud to say I think it deals with those and engages with those issues in quite creative ways. And I hope in ways that kind of move us forwards rather than kind of doubling down on, you know, lazy stereotypes. Yeah, I think it was a matter of timing. But yeah, there was a lot of kind of terrorist number 3 stuff. But I just made a decision I wasn't going to do it. I just thought I'd rather be broke. It's just, you know, wasn't always easy to say no. But
I'm sure not.
Felt like.
Yeah.
There was a time when I started and John and I, in those days, if there was a gang in a movie or a TV show, like a street gang, there'd be 2 white guys, 2 black guys, 2 Mexican guys, and they always had like a bandana. all of them had a bandana, and they wore clothes kind of like 80s, what's the guys that did Working for the Weekend, you know, that band out of Canada. Anyway, and it was, we always used to watch this and we go, where the hell is this gang from? It's like you got 2 guys from Brentwood, 2 guys from Compton.
Brentwood gangs are terrifying.
I know, right?
Oh my God. The worst.
And they were all in one gang together. And it's like, how did this happen?
The rest of you, I mean, were there ever points, Jeffrey, where you in that you felt you were pigeonholed and you were sort of very eagerly trying to sort of get out of whatever Hollywood wanted to make of you?
I don't know. I've, been pretty fortunate to have some varied opportunities. I guess lately there's been kind of a focus on sciences and scientific, oriented characters. Westworld is included in that, but I think there, I try to at least have some type of variety within even those kind of similar roles, coming at them from different angles. I don't think, it's one of the reasons I think that I've been able to work for a while, is I appreciate the process of transformation, having come from the theater and also been moved, by actors who transformed, Dustin Hoffman was like, a big, influence on me, when I was younger, and just like the magic of that, kind of, I'm just drawn to that aspect of what we do, Alec Guinness, and that's the magic of it for me. So I don't feel that I've been pigeonholed in that regard, because I've got no choice but to kind of be all over the map in order to survive it.
Are there roles that you guys are not approached for but you would love to do? I mean, types of things that you wish that you were the actor that they went to?
You mean, do we envy anybody?
And the types of roles. I mean, do you wish you could be, that bad guy in a movie but are never approached for that type of role? Do you wish that...
Well, I was asked to do a role a few years ago in a lovely little movie called Love is Strange that Ira Sachs co-wrote and directed. And it was finally a role where I was asked to do no acting at all. Just the most kind of muted and inconspicuous role. It was the role I'd been waiting for years. I guess because I have this rep as being a real actor-ish actor. Not necessarily an actor's actor, but an actor-ish actor. and it was wonderful. It was just almost a relief. And as a matter of fact, Sachs himself, the one direction that I heard from him more than any other was no acting. It was like, yes.
So Riz, I'm curious with you. So you come off of The Night Of, which is this wonderful, rich role, but a dark role, and Lena Dunham calls you, finds you somehow and says, hey, I want you to come on, girls, and by the way, you're going to impregnate my character, and not really care. Walk me through what that conversation was like and how you sort of got to the point where you said, yeah, let's do this.
Well, I'm just a fan of hers, to be honest. I think that she's a really singular, distinctive voice. If there's something that I try and seek out, in these early stages of my careers, one is to try and challenge myself, as you were saying, to try and transform if I can, or roles that maybe I haven't done. But the other is to just ally myself with distinctive voices, people who aren't really who are doing something different to everyone else. And I think Lena's one of those people. So really, when she called, it was just, I'll do anything. I'll do anything you want me to.
How much did you know about what you were going to do?
We spoke, we Skyped, and she broke it all down for me. And she said, you're going to play a surf instructor. And I was like, no one ever thinks of me for surf instructor. I think I can throw that open.
But that's a key to not being pigeonholed, is having the ability to recognize directors and talent, that are creative and open. Because I had a conversation with a guy a couple of months ago. He was talking, wanted me to do this thing. He's like, but I can't really imagine what you might do. And I was like, that's good, because I can't either. Right. But that was a problem for him. Yeah. Sure. And so I was like, I don't think this is a conversation we should continue. But to avoid being pigeonholed is really the choice in director, the choice in collaborative partner. Which is everything in this stuff that we do. I always say that, it's the best, the best thing about the work that we do is that it's collaborative. Yep. And the worst thing about the work that we do is that it's collaborative. It just depends on, who you're married to.
Who you're collaborating with.
Yeah. I was gonna say, like, real quick, you were talking about things that you'd like to do that you don't always get asked to do. People always tell me about my character. He seems like such a good guy, and I'm like, I wonder if Sterling's a good guy, like Randall is from This Is Us, et cetera. And I was like, I'm actually a dick, like a total douchebag. So I look forward to stepping into that and showing that side of me.
Here's a chance.
Exactly. There was a recent column written in the LA Times by a former colleague of mine who really praised This Is Us. Yeah. Because he said it was the first time on television, or at least in his memory, and I certainly can't remember another time, where a Black actor sort of portrayed the sort of, quote, the simmering rage of the successful Black man in white America. Yeah. Which I loved and I thought was fascinating. What does that mean to you, and how important was it for you to sort of portray precisely that?
What I love so much about the show and about the character of Randall is that he's Black on purpose. When what I mean by that is, so many times, for the sake of diversity on network television, there's going to be a Black guy or, a Latino guy, et cetera, and by happenstance, and that it just happened to be that. But the fact that he is Black, and we actually use that to tell the story of a Black man being raised by this white family who still has the experience of being Black in America. And his sort of coming to grips with the fact that regardless of his family, he is perceived in this way, right? And he has to walk a very particular line because he will be treated differently than his brother or sister are. And I enjoy it a great deal. And the feedback that I get from people when I'm out on the street is like, we don't get a chance to see this that often. Like a successful Black man married with 2 children who's happy and succeeding in life, but still has to deal with the fact that life is not the same. The paths that we walk are going to be different. Because you know what this little Black kid was doing? I don't know. I was a little boy living in Bethel Park, Pennsylvania, which is pretty much the whitest place on earth. I had this little notebook. And every time I met a new Black person, I would put a mark in this notebook. And every time I met a Black man, I wondered if somehow, if that man could possibly be my father. Someone was asking me the other day, like, a white woman who had adopted 2 Black sons, she was saying, like, what types of things do I need to tell my sons in terms of how they be? Well, when you're horsing around and playing and somebody gets singled out for being in trouble, when you're a little Black boy, it's not just boys being boys. There's an added level of, like, scrutiny that someone has to undergo in terms of that. So, yeah, no, I consider it a privilege and a great responsibility to try to be as truthful to the character as possible.
I'm curious, and this is a show that's run by a white man, a room that is presumably largely white. How much of that is you adding to the character and trying to sort of capture that sort of fundamental anger that you're talking about?
We had about 7 writers in our writer's room, and 2 of them were Black. 2 of them were African American, as a matter of fact. So I found that very, very helpful because if either I or the writers had a question or suggestion to Dan, everybody was incredibly open, and the collaborative aspect of it was welcomed in that aspect, because Dan would say, like, I'm not 100% sure about this. I was like, let me give you my perspective. I can't give you all of Black America, but I can give you my perspective, and then hopefully that will ring true as we put it out into the world.
It's so great when you do something that's very successful and that you also feel so personally invested in.
Yeah.
And you feel like you're making a difference. I mean, all of us actors aspire to that. We want to do well, but we want to do good.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
And to open people's consciousness.
No question about
including our own.
For shizzle. For shizzle.
I'm curious, Jeffrey, in your case with this character, obviously there was a moment later in the season where everything shifts. Yeah, but I'm curious, how much did you know going in? Were you told about that shift, or is that something you found out over the course of the season in reading a script and said, oh gosh, I'm not who I thought I was?
I found out that morning that, I showed up to shoot the scene.
What?
No. But some people prefer that.
I don't think it would have been possible with this, because, I think what's interesting about the show is that there was this big reveal, but if you look back at the previous episodes, you'll see these breadcrumbs that are now more fluorescent, that were already there, but were just very subtle hints at where it was going.
Consciousness isn't a journey upward, but a journey inward. Not a pyramid, but a maze. Every choice could bring you closer to the center, or send you spiraling to the edges, to madness. Do you understand now, Dolores, what the center represents? Whose voice I've been wanting you to hear?
So, there were a lot of people online, predicting, but it was everything was foretold,
Right.
And many of the layers and the reveals, everything was told, So I didn't know when we shot the pilot.
You did not.
I'll be very careful. I haven't quite caught up with this gigantic.
Okay. So, but I was when we came back to go into full production, Lisa Joy pulled me aside and said, Bernard's, incredibly articulate woman who stumbled around for like 20, 30 seconds. He's very complicated. How do I say this? And then she dropped it on me.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so it was necessary because, again, there were little flashes of forecasting that I would throw in here and there, just kind of, based on that, just little, just informed little moments.
Do you guys like knowing where these characters are going? Is it helpful? Did you know in your case?
Yeah, well, I feel like in the case of a play or film, you know the beginning, end, and middle and end of the script. And so if you're in a position in television where the showrunner knows what the arc of the character is, tell me, because that allows me to help shape that, that journey with you.
Yeah.
The idea of not knowing, I guess that can be exciting, but I like to know.
I've been in 2 situations now where when I was offered a role, the first was Dexter, and the second is Trial and Error, where the writers told me the entire story, but told me that I couldn't tell anyone, including all the actors I was working with.
Oh, wow.
So I went through Dexter playing the Trinity Killer with all these secrets. They didn't intend to tell me everything, but when they pitched it to me, I kept saying, no, but what about this? What about that? So I knew the whole story. Nobody else did, including the directors.
Oh, interesting.
Sure.
There was a moment when I was sitting, my character was sitting at a counter watching TV, and a murder was being reported, and it was clear to the viewing audience that I had done the murder. In fact, I had not. And the director, Keith Gordon, really good director, he said something to me which betrayed the fact that he didn't know himself.
Right.
Wow.
And I had to take him aside and tell him, you know what's going on, don't you? And he didn't.
It's kind of perfect in a way, because it creates the dynamic of
It was
the...
great.
Yeah.
There was so much tension, this culture of secrecy.
Sure.
Including the crew. They were obsessed with the show.
It was very similar to what was going on with us. We all had our own individual secrets.
Right.
And it'd be a flurry of texts. When the individual secrets were revealed. Between cast, we what?
Were you trying to figure out each other's?
Some were. I knew a bit because there were multiple layers to to this thing. I knew a bit more than most. So I was satisfied with my with my pile of knowledge. But there were some who were they were I think
angling for more.
Yeah, there were betting lines being offered and odds being issued, but yeah.
That's great. Yeah. So you play on Fargo two brothers, but very different types of roles. You have one who's this sort of handsome, self-made mogul, and the other one is a balding, pot-bellied guy who's sort of down on his luck and sort of has a chip on his shoulder. Which for you was more fun to play, more freeing to play? Were you more comfortable in one versus the other?
Well, because they're both very different. They're satisfying in different ways, and I don't have a favorite in terms of playing them because they're both interesting to play. Mm-hmm. But I think in terms of liking them, I like Ray. Ray's there's the premise of this season of Fargo that I'm doing is that there's two brothers, an older and a younger, who when they're teenagers, I think when Ray's 15 and Emmett is 17, their father passes away in their driveway. And in his will, he leaves Emmett a red Corvette. He's the older brother. Okay. And he leaves Ray a stamp collection. And so what transpires, this is all before the show starts, of course, but what happens is Emmett persuades Ray to take the Corvette. Ray's probably a virgin and so he says, you'll get laid if you drive this car. And he takes the stamp collection. And he goes on to have an incredibly successful life. As a businessman, he becomes a parking lot king of Minnesota. And his brother, who now has a red Corvette, ends up living a shitty life and is a parole officer and has a red Corvette.
Look, you're lucky I don't sue. I mean, a legal document which delineates things, bequeaths them to specific parties, a father dead on a driveway, an older boy taking advantage of a younger playing on Nobody took advantage. It was a trade. If I had a time machine, you'd see I'd play back the tape. Emmett, come on, I'm begging you. Take the stupid stamps already. Give me the car. No, that was you tricking me, Ray.
But he's also just fallen in love with this incredible character, Nikki Swango, played by Mary Elizabeth Winstead. And she's so out of his league, like drop dead gorgeous and clever. And what's happened, I found, by playing them is that, and it's interesting that we're doing this during the sort of Trump era, is that Ray has become sort of the embodiment of love, like I'm playing this man who's so in love and he's got a soul and a heart. And Emmett is the businessman and he has a wife and a family, he's a faithful man, but everything's sort of compartmentalized in a way. He's sort of soulless, it's so Ray's more fun to play because it's much more fun to be in love than it is to be someone like Trump.
Yeah. Yep. Fair enough.
Time to talk politics.
A few of you here, certainly Billy, you're one who moves very fluidly back and forth, comedy, drama. Do you, A, get treated differently in one versus the other, and B, are you more at ease in one or the other?
Honest to God, I am known for playing all these different types of characters, and I play myself every time. I believe, at least for me, I'm not going to do my best work if I'm playing someone other than myself. And the way I looked at things, this is also, you have to remember this is my experience. I'm not saying everybody would agree with this, but I never saw an acting coach or a director or anybody make a good actor better. I've seen them make them worse. And and I've never seen one make a bad actor good. I believe that there are a lot of personalities within someone.
Yeah.
And that if you have life experience and you've seen a lot, if you're a good observer and you behave exactly as you would in any given situation as yourself, because the character tells you already. You read a script, hey, how did you come up with whatever? There's no explanation for it, at least in my case. I read the script, I know what the guy looks like, how he is. And like in my season of Fargo, I played this cat, Lauren Malvo, and it was so perfectly written that I didn't have to go in there and be the asshole I usually am and changing everything, whatever, you know?
Yeah.
But what I did do that was probably different than maybe they envisioned it was I played it much more low-key and laconic than maybe they'd thought, which was the case in a movie called A Man Who Wasn't There, which I did with the Coen brothers, which was the same kind of deal. If you imagine Ed Crane and The Man Who Wasn't There losing his mind, then it's sort of the same guy. So that's a thing. To more specifically answer your question, the thing that I find in comedy, as opposed to drama, is that I tend to not be very funny around a comedy set.
Interesting.
I, on the other hand, find myself very funny on a dramatic set.
Because you need that levity? Is that what that's about?
It's because there's a certain energy that, going back to the character in The Man Who Wasn't There, who most of the time was just smoking and sitting on a couch or something, or cutting somebody's hair, I would talk to people right up to the time they would say rolling and make jokes, run around. I wasn't that way at all. That way, when I'm sitting there still, the energy of what I was just doing is still there. I was never the type of guy, if I was going to be still and like thoughtful in a scene, the kind of guy who went in the corner and starts getting thoughtful and everything.
All method in that way.
That's right. And or gobbling in the hallway, or thinking about when your daddy ran over your puppy or whatever. I will always just behave however I'm behaving, and then let that carry over in the scene. And if you're out there trying to crack jokes with everybody on a comedy set, once you get in the scene, you kind of blew it already. I mean, I think because I don't like to look at. When young actors ask me advice, I'll always say, never look at a character as this mountain you have to climb. And when you talk about the character, don't say, well, Brad's the kind of guy who, if you separate yourself from that character, you've already lost in a lot of ways. Because if you're looking at a character as a hill you have to climb, a thing you have to become, then you're play acting now. And if you don't think about it, and okay, you're playing Bill Johnson here, or whatever, that runs a tractor shop in Nebraska, just go in there when the scene starts and start yapping. As opposed to sort of like, I got to become Bill Johnson, what do I do? And just put some goofy teeth in or whatever it is, and then, hey, I'm Bill Johnson. You just don't do that,
So I'm curious, so you win the Golden Globe for Goliath, and you said, I think, in the press room backstage that you had wanted to play a guy who's had to sort of fight his way back from nowhere because it was something that you related to. What did you mean by that, and in what ways do you relate to this Billy character?
Well, first of all, it was fun, not fun. It was good playing a character who had the same name.
Helpful?
Because somebody says Billy and you look, so that was great. I played myself on that show, pretty much, and in the really true sense of that, I didn't ever do much. I wasn't real patient on that first season. I was had an irritable year inside my head.
How did that manifest itself?
Every time somebody pissed me off, I said, "Look, man, don't do that. And so people thought that was really good, on the show, but it was pretty real.
So we should have your co-stars around this table and get the real story, is what you're saying.
No, I mean, I wasn't an ass, I'm just saying, it's like I was...
I'm a dick.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it was, I like the idea of a guy who knows what it's like to be somebody, and right now they're not. I like that idea.
Sure.
And it started out as well, is it Paul Newman in The Verdict or what? But then it takes it on its own life and goes in other directions, But the hardest thing, honestly, for me in that, as well as movies like an Armageddon, the hardest thing for me is always if I have a bunch of technical stuff to say, like lawyer stuff.
Jargon.
Jargon. If you have to say stuff like that, I want to be able to say it knowing what it means. Well, like I was saying, we'll take that up at my hearing because I'm sure Your Honor knows, as any good judge would, even the corrupt kind, that by holding me in contempt, you entitle me to a hearing. A hearing in which I'm allowed to introduce evidence including, but not limited to, misdeeds by defense counsel, and here's the good one, judicial bias. That's right, Your Honor, I said judicial bias. Just put it on my tab. If you don't know what it means and you're just listing stuff off, audiences are not stupid. They can tell that.
Yep.
And so what do? You go talk to NASA guys and hang out with some astronauts and say, hey, when I say this, what the hell does that mean? And they tell you, and you go, okay, now I can say that with confidence.
Sure, sure.
And I played an air traffic controller one time in the 90s, pushing 10, right. And I went to air traffic control school.
Yeah.
Cusack and I both went to air traffic control school up in Toronto. and actually did it. I mean, I can land a plane in Newark.
That's,
you know what I mean? But you got to learn that stuff or you can't just say it.
Right.
And so I found that the hardest thing on the Goliath was learning what all this legal stuff meant. And once I knew what it meant, then you feel like a lawyer. And my wife says I'm like a lawyer anyway in arguments, and I kind of am, to tell you the truth.
I love that.
That's one of the things I enjoy most about what we do, is the research aspect to it, actually.
You did a phenomenal amount of research for this role.
Well, yeah, I mean, I guess I agree with you that inside of us, we all contain the possibility of being each other, within us, under a different set of conditions.
Yeah.
If the given circumstances change, I'm more like you, you're more like me, and we are all kind of slaves to the circumstances that breed us. Situation breeds character. I agree with that, but I do think that you need to have sometimes those reference points, as you did as the air traffic controller. So playing a kid from Queens in New York and he's a Knicks fan, I don't know about basketball. I don't know,
don't even know how to pronounce them.
No idea. And,
so what is that process?
Yeah, I did all the research I could about the New York Kinks and tried to get really under the skin.
You got it, you nailed it.
But it's interesting because when you start doing that, it's crazy what that opens up. And the idea of just being a hardcore sports fan who can't play the sport at all, really. And what's that about? Being a spectator in life, kind of living your life, like watching other people live out your dreams, always wanting to be in the game, but just being sat on the sidelines. And lots of interesting stuff like that opened up. I guess something else I really enjoy doing, because I'm always asked to play outside of my own accent. So it started off being just for those purposes, I interview people and record them. But what I found in doing that is I get so much more. The crazy story, I mean...
Didn't you spent time, and you went to Rikers, or...?
Yeah, I went to Rikers Island Prison, which thankfully I hear they're closing now, because some of the stories that I heard there
What were you
wild.
hearing? I mean, what was...
it's like, even if you... Forget if you turn up there as a new inmate. If you turn up there as a corrections officer, the inmates will test you. So if you turn up, you're a new guy, the inmates will start messing with you or just disobeying you or being verbally abusive. And you've got to prove yourself. And I said, well, what does that mean? How you're extra harsh with laying down the rules? He goes, no, you have to fight them. It's like, how do you mean? Like, how do you fight them? Psychologically, he's like, no, you take them out in cuffs, you go out into the corridor, you make sure that the cameras are shut off there, and you uncuff them, and you go at it.
Yeah.
Oh.
That's how you win respect as a CEO. So there's a kind of crazy gladiatorial dog-eat-dog situation there. And interviewing people that have been through Rikers, been through the prison system, yeah, I mean, those stories are all very flashy and they stick with you. But it was a kind of detail of things like how people just let go of family. Mm-hmm. You know, it's too painful. After a while, it's just like, you don't want that umbilical cord to survive.
Hey, yo. Dude asked you to use that cell phone I gave you. Why'd you say no?
'Cause it's mine. What?
What? Think I was just trying to save you a trip to the payphone? It's a cash machine, dummy. $10 a minute. Oh. I'm gonna make a proper convict out of you yet.
So interviewing is something that I really enjoy doing. I kind of go nuts on that and just record people for hours. And every now and again, you'll hear someone and the way they talk, and it's like, it makes you sit up and can't quite explain it. And you're like, that's the cadence, or that's the thing, you know?
Right. Well, prison is an interesting place. I've shot in a lot of prisons, and that's an environment that can really put you in there. Yeah. I mean, you get it right away, and you start to see how people operate and everything. We were shooting Monsters Ball in Angola prison in Louisiana. They call it the Farm.
I've shot there too.
You shot in Angola? Yeah.
Yeah.
Very interesting place.
Yes.
And Sean Combs, who was in the movie, he wasn't an actor. You know, he was a huge star.
Never heard of him.
Yeah. And I'll talk to you later. I'll tell you all about hip hop later.
Boss.
But Sean said to me, there's a scene when he was going to the electric chair, and we shot it on the actual death row, and it was the electric chair they always used there, right? Well, Sean was in there before the scene, and they shaved his head and all this kind of stuff, and he said to me, he said, "Listen, man, I'm nervous as hell." He goes, he goes, "This is not my bag." He goes, "I'm in the music business." He goes, "I know you are too." He said, "You're on stage and you grew up as a musician." He goes, "But I don't know if you need this, but whatever you need in the music business, if I can give you any tips about like moves on stage." I said, "I'm not really a mover, but
Tips on moves.
Right, yeah, right. And I said, "That's okay," but he said, "But man, just anything you can do to help me. You got anything for me, because I'm nervous."
Yeah.
And I said, "Well, you're already there, dude."
Yeah.
Yeah. And he says, "What do you mean?" I said, "You're going to the electric chair, man."
Yeah.
And he goes, "Oh yeah."
That's so crazy.
And so, you know what I
happens
mean?
all the time. I don't know if you guys ever get this, but like, it's almost like, I feel like the process of acting is a process of getting out of your own way. It's like the thing is happening. If you surrender yourself to the circumstances, not only on the page, but on the set, sometimes things have a weird way of mirroring, dynamics end up mirroring each other. John Turturro and I have this kind of relationship on the show where he takes me under his wing. And it kind of became a bit like that on the show.
Sure.
You know, and it's really fascinating, I think, the way that those dynamics end up replicating themselves on and off set.
Actually shot a film, just staying on the prison theme for a minute. Shot a film last year in a working maximum security prison out in Indiana, largely with inmates in the cast. My co-star is a young man. He's 34 years old. He's in for 65 years. There's another young man who's in for 170 years. He plays one of the heavies. His sentence was reduced from 210. Another guy who's an extra was on death row for 7 years. Talk about, atmosphere kind of informing behavior. And, I think I'm still trying to figure out how we received this piece, I think I hope what we've done in this piece is that we've, it may be an act of forgiveness. I think often we make films about prison, or we make films about issues of social importance. And as artists, we often leave the problem solving to others. We kind of raise the red flag of alert, but we don't necessarily get involved with, the dirty work of solution. But I think what was interesting about this process was that built into it was a kind of solution, in that it was, a collaboration of unlikely partners coming together with men who are, the wretched of the earth, who have been completely, forgotten, and asking them to do something humane and do something positive. And I think it can be replicated in other forms, not just in filmmaking, but it also required a human lens to view them. And I think if we are to understand criminality, if we're to understand the drivers behind what led these men to this place, then that's a necessary lens. But, as you say, in the era of Trump, unfortunately, that's not where we're, how we're viewing complex issues through nuanced eyes. So anyway, but
no, I think it's really important point, beautifully made, man, because I think we're living in a time right now where so many people are being dehumanized. And it's a strange thing right now as an artist to just say being on Team Humans is a political act.
Does it change
it's really
the types of projects you want to do, the types of roles you want to play in this era?
I hope so.
You do hope so?
I hope so for everyone.
I mean, it shouldn't be just about entertainment. You hope to be able to give people a break from certain things, but hopefully you can also educate and edify people at the same time. With This Is Us has been the biggest comment that I've gotten is that it brings people together in a very interesting way. And it's the one show that's it's a very family-oriented show, and it's about connection. And it's so interesting because we have, gay folks, and you have overweight people, and you have black folks, and going out into communities that may not have an opportunity to see things that are quite as heterogeneous as the show is, and the more homogenized places in the country and in the world, they're having an opportunity to meet people for the first time. And hopefully through meeting people, the next time they encounter them, they see them as people.
Yep. Not the first time.
I think it's a weird thing, isn't it? Because I think certain stories or certain storytellers are kind of encumbered with the responsibility of being seen as political, whether they like it or not.
Right.
Because sometimes it's like the first story of that type, or I'm thinking of, some of the kind of trans actresses in Orange is the New Black, for example.
Right.
Or, I know the Khan family in The Night Of, I think is, it's a Muslim American family.
Right.
And it's being portrayed. But the weird thing is that I don't think that's a political act. That wasn't a political decision. That's just doubling down on affirming our common humanity, which is really a kind of baseline for all creativity. It's nothing like crazily, it's not a renegade move to do that. But then, a couple of months after the show comes out, certain dominoes fall, and people start viewing it through a different lens. But yeah, I do believe it's an artist's responsibility to engage with the times that we're living in.
Sure.
Meryl Streep's kind of extremely noticeable speech at the Golden Globes is a very political speech, but there was a long passage in that speech which kind of defined what we're talking about when she said, our job is to inhabit other people. It's an empathetic gesture. To be other people, to inform. She put it much better than I can, but if I remember it correctly.
Hers was written down.
That's right. just to show people what it's like to be them. And in a sense, that's our mission at the best of times. Our most idealistic aspiration is to do exactly that, to just show people how other people feel.
Absolutely.
Well, I think the act of empathy is treasure right now.
It's so important right now because these are the unapathetic times we're living in.
That's right. And I tend to think, though, because I grew up in Washington, D.C., that everything is political. And I think even in the absence of a political gesture, there's politics.
That is almost the most political kind of art, because it's kind of reinforcing a status quo by not commenting or challenging it in any way.
Right, exactly.
And I've always found it, sorry.
No, carry on.
Well, I've always found it weird that people kind of would often say to me, why do you always do political work? And the weird thing is like, I'm just telling... There are a certain subset of stories that are open to me to tell. And I'm glad to say that subset is kind of expanding. And I think that is maybe kind of progress, whether it's political progress or social progress or cultural progress. But it's weird because I think politics is just a point of view on the world. And every story has a point of view on the world. Yeah. I think if it's just a point of view that you're not used to hearing or seeing, it suddenly gets labeled as political, kind of like marginalized from the mainstream. It's back at the back of the DVD store with like, you know, the subtitled films. But actually, you know, what we think of as mainstream stories or stories that aren't political are very political in their absence of interrogating the status quo.
So when Friends shows in New York, you know, absent people of color, you know, there's politics in that. It leads to an understanding of, you know, among those homogenous communities in this country that, you know...
that's the way it is.
That, you know...
what a valid story it looks like.
Exactly. It validates their own isolation and leads to, you know, a misunderstanding of the complexity of who we are.
Not to take a turn, but did you hear from the royal family? What was the sort of feedback? I know we were taking a total left turn here. But I am curious in terms of feedback of seeing yourself on screen. I mean, did you hear from... the family?
No, in a sense, that's kind of what the series is about. There's this separation, not of church and state, but of the monarchy and the public. They never say anything. Their job is to do nothing and say nothing. And there's Peter Morgan, who wrote the script. He has created scenes where they talk about this very idea.
Never let them see the real Elizabeth Windsor. The cameras, the television. Never let them see that carrying the crown is often a burden. Let them look at you, but let them see only the eternal.
What the monarchy is, so much of it is about doing nothing and betraying nothing. And they betrayed nothing about whether they've seen the show or whether they like it. There are little rumors afoot.
What are the rumors?
I wish I had a nickel for every time someone has asked me, what does the royal family think? But the fact is they are the most public and the most private people in the world. And the only people that they can honestly let down their hair with and confide in, if they do, we have to speculate on that too, is each other. They're in a little tiny little bubble in Buckingham Palace. For some reason, this is something that has really intrigued people. They're fascinated about what pressures this puts on royal people. And Morgan has just done this remarkable act of speculation. What are the conversations like between the Queen and the Prime Minister? Because nobody knows except the two of them.
Well, it's that you finally sort of drew back the curtain on this world that I think we didn't know a lot about. Now we feel like we do, and yet whether that's real or not, how they're reacting, we don't have any idea.
Surely it must be based on some source material as well, right?
Yeah, Morgan did unbelievable research, and he had a little team of researchers, and they sort of laid out all this information for him. And my notion is that he just picked these little episodes, these tiny little details, and expanded each one of them into an hour of drama, like so many extraordinary little one-act plays with amazing characters. You know, and Churchill is just this he's the man from the political world, the prime minister who is the only one who intersects with the royal world. It was just sort of surprisingly fascinating. I can imagine a really dull soap opera about the royal family.
And that it was not.
This was completely fascinating because he paid so much attention to the psychological tensions among, I mean, you have stories like two sisters, one of whom jealous of the other. How different that is when they're both, they are a queen and a princess who actually exists. Or a husband and wife, one of whom becomes queen and the other is suddenly emasculated. I mean, that is a fantastic psychological tale to tell.
Absolutely.
So, I mean, it couldn't be more rarefied or more different from what we're talking about in terms of American politics.
So you guys have played these roles, some of them dark, some of them light. They're all intense in their ways. How do you escape when they're over, when they yell rap? What is that sort of process?
Well, I think it's something all of us know very well. I myself go into this predictable 2-week state of gloom. This wonderful world has been taken away from you because while you're working on a play or a film or a sitcom, you're in this social organism, you're in this creative process. You're also very much catered to and taken care of. Your words are written for you. You have an audience, applauding for you. All of this is taken away from you, and you just rejoin the quotidian world. If you have a wife, she's suddenly very, very testy with you.
Where have you been? Yeah.
But it's just because of the joy of acting. You take all that away for a period of time, and.
So, what does this escape look like for the rest of you?
Oh, for me, it's fairly simple. I'm a young father. I got a 5-year-old and an 18-month-old, and once you go home, it's just your dad. And it's a wonderful thing because you spend so much time necessarily thinking about yourself in this business. It's nice to have something that mandates, that takes you outside of your head and just says like, I need you to be my dad. I need you to
I don't care about that, Emmy.
I need you to wipe my booty. Like, I need you to whatever it is. Like, and it's just automatically like, okay, cool. It's wonderful.
Yeah, it's an extremely important thing in your life to have something that's more important to you than yourself.
Amen.
I actually think that that's also a kind of driver for the best work that we do. When the work that we do isn't about us. And on a basic level, I think, when it's about the other character, when it's about the scene. But I don't know, I feel like sometimes when you've connected to, it may just be a delusional notion of a higher purpose to your work, whether it's, when you were working in prison or, what you were talking about kind of representing a kind of unseen archetype for a successful black man. Or I feel like that somehow brings out our best work. But maybe
so no one does anything crazy?
Well,
Come on, there's not like a crazy trip that you take post?
Well, post or in the midst of. I mean, I've found actually kind of a fantastic release that's like, kind of changed my life in many ways. Working out here on Westworld, I live in New York. Yeah. My kids are there. They're older now, so they allow me to go away a bit more. They're 15 and 11, to go away a bit more than I have in the past. It was also kind of arranged that I would be on, week off, so I could get back. So I was flying back and forth. But when I was here, I found the ocean here, and I finally discovered the singular advantage of Los Angeles over New York. Is the ocean. So when I wasn't working, I was staying up in Santa Clarita where we shot, and I'd go straight to the ocean and surf and get in the waves and just be cleansed and away from it all. And not that it was a necessary escape, but I just found it clarifying, revitalizing all these things, and then I'd go back home to my kids and do that. But that's become my thing. So when even if I'm in the middle of Indiana, I'm finding the nearest ocean. I want to say one more thing though. Just my kids, going back to kids, and they do ask. They do demand everything of us. But my son said something to me before I went to do this movie, because I've done a few things since we finished Westworld, and I've been away, a bit more than I have. And he said, after he saw the show, Westworld, which he was really kind of enthralled by, and he understood that there were kind of necessary things that needed to be done to, because he does like the school that he attends, and it's it's not a public school, but. He said, when I left for this, I said, I got to go back, away again. And I go, I'll be back when I can on weekends. But he said, okay. He said, make it count. Oh. And it was like, and so, I have like, sometimes I have like mantras that I drop in before I do something just to kind of, get my head together. It's become one of my mantras.
Sure.
I love that.
Yeah.
I love that.
Like,
But again, it's about something other than and bigger than yourself. Yeah. And that's what motivates the best work, I think.
All right, Billy, you seem like you would have a fun escape.
Mine's the same as theirs, kids.
kids.
We all need
They
a
don't
hobby.
allow me.
Yeah. Where's the
We do
fun
need
in
a
this
hobby.
group? Come on, guys.
My
No one does
favorite
anything
story
fun.
along these lines is when, in the 50s, when Sid Caesar, after he'd done Your Show of Shows, he did a show called The Sid Caesar Show. And he was working his ass off. He was producing and performing and making comedy and had little kids. And he came home to his daughter. He always tried to come home in time to put her to bed, but he was a little late. She was kind of drowsy. He came in to say goodnight. She said, "Daddy, why are you never here when I go to bed?" He says, "Well, you know, honey, I have to work so hard, you know, on the show." She said, "Well, what show?" and he said, "Well, you know, the Sid Caesar Show." And she said, "You're Sid Caesar?"
That's fantastic. All right, we're going to take one more left turn just to wrap this up, which is, what was the show growing up that you guys absolutely loved?
The A-Team.
The Sid Caesar Show.
The A-Team for you?
I tell you, one for me, I was a junior or sophomore in high school, where I felt like television had done something that was very unique and special. And it was NYPD Blue, right? And I remember watching it like 9 o'clock Tuesday nights on ABC, and I was like, oh, I never seen like this, like real people. Like this is, I got like my breath got taken away from the whole thing, and I was like, maybe this is something that I could do. I would like to do that. Like growing up where I was from, acting always meant in a very naive way, like putting on tights and speaking in a very highfalutin way. And I've worn tights and spoken highfalutin as well. But to see that show and just like how this was just raw, you know what I'm saying? It was real. I got very, very excited about it. And so all through grad school, I was like, one day I'm gonna be on NYPD Blue, like y'all gonna wait. And the show's around, and I made it into the last season with a co-star. Oh, and I walked around the set, and I was talking to friends, and I was like, yo, man, this is crazy, son. Like, this is where this happened, and this is where this happened. And he's like, you really like the show? I was like, yeah, man.
That's fantastic.
So yeah, the blue is cool. Okay.
I love that. What about you, Ewan?
I don't know. I'm just thinking of lots of comedy shows really from Britain, you know? Ernie and Wise and Morecambe and Wise and I don't know.
You're a comedy guy.
Well, I guess when you're growing up, that was the kind of thing we watched on the on the weekends when you got to watch television.
Yeah.
I don't know. I didn't have a favorite. Like I loved MASH. I remember really loving MASH. I don't really.
This will date me. I mean, I'm clearly the oldest at the table.
Black
but
don't crack, though.
I really did love the early 50s comics on television.
Yeah.
Bob Hope, Milton Berle, and Sid Caesar on Your Show of Shows so vividly. I mean, they were, and of course there was only 3 networks, if that. Everybody was watching these shows. And I had occasion to do a photo session with Milton Berle himself. When at the height of Third Rock, it was sort of new TV and old TV comedy, a real whack job, Milton Berle. He was teaching me all sorts of shtick with a cigar, and it was wild. But we sort of hit it off for those few hours. And at the Emmy Awards, I think I presented an Emmy Award, and I was backstage a couple of years later, and it was the night when Milton Berle, Bob Hope, and Sid Caesar were brought out on stage. Bob Hope literally in a kind of palanquin, you know, he's carried out, and the audiences went mad. Just before then, Milton Berle took me over and introduced me to these old guys in this sort of half light of backstage. It was just this incredible moment. I was 7 years old again.
It's funny that we mentioned comedy. You all mentioned comedy because I think for me as well. I mean, if there's like if I think of like a favorite show, and it's much more difficult now, as you say, because back then we were all watching the same things, but it was Sanford and Son.
I was about to say Norman Lear,
and it was because Norman Lear, yes, but because I think Red Fox was one of the greatest performers that TV has seen.
All in the Family. I was just on the same level. Like,
for sure. For sure. funny that comedy, so why are we not doing more comedy?
Yeah, guys.
That is the question. Well, thank you guys.
I know what to pitch your agents now.
Exactly. Thank you guys all for being part
What
of this.
a pleasure to talk to you guys. It's really an honor to be with you.
Hi, I'm Oprah.
Hey, I'm Issa Rae. Catherine Hahn.
Kevin Bacon, Billy Bob Thornton,
Elizabeth Moss, Kris Jenner, Minnie Driver, and thanks for watching.
Thanks
for watching.
Thanks for watching
The Hollywood Reporter
on YouTube.
On YouTube.
Hold on. One more time. Be sure to hit subscribe for more videos.